What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards, old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. This week on Not Your Average Meta, we have a game featuring a new player and the return of your 3 favorite commander vets, all playing different token decks. First up, we have Eli, an up-and-coming Magic talent playing his Alela Artful Provocateur deck. This is an Esper deck that looks to utilize artifacts and enchantments to create a large quantity of fairy tokens. Then we have Gavin flexing on the rest of the table with his Judge promo Edgar Markov deck. This deck is a Mardu Vampire tribal deck that looks to use Edgar's Eminence ability to spam the board with vampire tokens. Next, we have Justin playing his Spirit Tribal deck being led by Ranar the Ever-Watchful. This deck looks to take advantage of foretelling and blinking permanents to create an army of Spirit tokens. Finally, we have Fog Raw back playing his trusty $50 Krenko 10 Street Kingpin deck. This deck looks to take advantage of using Krenko as a Voltron commander in order to dump out a ton of Goblin tokens to overrun his opponents. Now that we have our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Fog plays a mountain and passes his turn. Eli plays a Hollowed Fountain, paying 2 life to bring it into play untapped, then casts a Mystic Remora. Gavin draws and plays a tapped Sacred Foundry for turn. Justin draws and plays a tapped Deserted Beach for turn and passes. Fog plays another mountain for turn, then taps 2 to cast Krenko's command, getting 2 Goblin tokens while Eli draws off his Remora. Eli starts his turn paying for his Remora, he then plays a Glacial Fortress for turn and passes. Gavin pays 1 to cast a Soul Ring, allowing Eli to draw a card. He then plays a Skull Clamp, allowing Eli to draw another card. Justin draws and plays an island, he then pays 2 for a Supreme Phantom. Fog draws for turn and plays a 3rd mountain. He then taps out to cast his commander Krenko. Fog then goes to combat swinging 1 goblin apiece at Eli and Gavin. Eli starts his turn paying 2 for his Remora, then draws for turn. He then plays a Plains for turn and pays 1 for his Esper Sentinel. Gavin draws and plays a Blood Crypt, paying 2 life to bring it into play untapped. He then pays 2 to cast a Blood Artist, getting a Vampire token. Gavin uses his floating mana to clamp his Vampire token, drawing 2 cards, and pings Eli for 1 life while he gains a life. Justin draws and pays 2 to cast a Loyal Warhound, going to get a Plains, putting it into play. He then plays another Plains for turn and pays 1 to cast a Paladin class before passing. Fog draws and plays another mountain before paying 2 to cast a Sigil of Valor. He then pays to equip his Sigil to Krenko. Fog then goes to combat and attacks Gavin. He then puts a counter on Krenko and creates 5 Goblin tokens. Gavin then takes his 5 damage and Fog passes. On his upkeep, Eli lets his Remora die and draws for turn. He then plays his Proxy Marsh Flats, paying 1 life to sack it, going to get a Swamp. Eli then pays 4 to cast his commander Alela. Gavin draws and plays a Mana Crypt. He then pays 4 to cast a Linda the Duskgrows, getting a Vampire token. Justin draws a turn and plays another Plains before paying to cast his Soul Ring. He then pays 4 to cast his own commander Ranar, passing turn. Fog draws and plays another mountain. He then pays 3 and casts an Uphill Battle before going to combat. Fog then swings Krenko to Eli, putting another counter on Krenko. Eli then takes a 10 commander damage while Fog creates 10 more Goblin tokens. Eli draws and plays a Plains for turn. He then casts a Time Wipe to wipe the board. He then bounces the Alela back to his hand. All the creatures then get destroyed, and Gavin uses Blood Artist triggers to ping each player equal to the amount of creatures that they had destroyed. Gavin then gets a 1/1 Vampire token off Alinda dying. Gavin untaps and rolls for his Crypt, losing, taking 3 damage. He then draws and plays his Sundown Pass before paying 1 to clamp his token to draw 2 cards. Gavin then casts a Blade of the Blood Chief and a Vito Thorn of the Duskgrows, getting another Vampire token. Justin draws for turn and taps out to recast his commander Ranar. Fog draws and taps out to recast his commander Krenko. Eli draws a turn and also pays to recast his commander Alela. He then pays 1 to cast a Flickering Ward, enchanting his commander, giving her protection from red while getting a fairy token. Gavin untaps and rolls for his Crypt, losing again, taking another 3 life. He then draws for turn and pays to equip Vito with his Blade of the Blood Chief. Gavin then pays to clamp his vampire token, drawing 2 cards while putting 2 counters on Vito. He then plays a land for turn and taps out to cast his commander, Edgar Markov. Justin draws for turn, then pays 4 for a teleportation circle. He then blinks his Soul Ring at the end of turn and forgets to get a spirit token. Fog draws and plays a mountain before paying 4 for a Beetleback Chief, getting 2 goblin tokens. He then pays to equip his sigil back to Krenko and goes to combat swinging at Eli, putting a counter on Krenko. Eli then takes the commander damage and Fog gets 5 goblin tokens. Eli draws for turn, then pays 2 for Dimir Signet, creating a fairy token. He then pays 3 for Etchings of the Chosen, choosing fairies, getting another fairy token. Gavin finally wins a crypt roll, then draws for turn. He then casts a Changeling Outcast, getting a vampire token. Gavin then pays to clamp his token in order to draw 2 more cards before paying 3 to cast Estincia Masquerade. Justin draws and plays an island for turn, then goes directly to his end step, blinking his Soul Ring, giving him a spirit token. Fog draws for turn, then pays 1 for Goblin Sledder. He then goes to combat swinging Krenko at Gavin. He then adds an additional counter to Krenko and gets 11 more Goblin tokens. Gavin then declares Vito as a blocker, and in response to blocks, Fog casts Outmaneuver, targeting Krenko, allowing him to deal damage as if though he wasn't blocked. He then sacks 5 more Goblin tokens in order to pump up Krenko enough to take Gavin out with commander damage. Fog then casts a Brainstone and ends his turn. At the end of his turn, Eli pays to bounce his Flickering Ward back to his hand. Eli draws for turn to cast Gossamer Chains, getting a fairy token. He then recasts the Flickering Ward, naming red, and gets another fairy token. Eli then casts All That Glitters, enchanting Alela, getting another fairy token, and then goes to combat and swings Alela at Fog for 6 commander damage before passing. Justin starts his turn casting Faithful Mending. He then gains 2 life, draws 2 cards, and discards 2 cards. Justin then foretells a card and creates a spirit token before he pays the flashback Faithful Mending, gaining 2 more life, drawing 2 more cards, and discards 2 more cards. He then plays an island for turn and blinks his Soul Ring, getting another spirit token. At the end of his turn, Fog sacks his Brainstone in order to draw 3 cards and then puts 2 cards back on top of his library. Fog draws for turn, then pays 3 to cast Bogart Shenanigans, and then another 3 for Raid Bombardment. He then goes to combat and swings his Goblin Sledder and 13 Goblin tokens at Eli, and his Commander and Beetleback Chief at Justin. Eli takes 14 damage off the Raid Bombardment, while Fog creates 4 more Goblin tokens. Eli then blocks the Goblin Sledder in a token before dying, while Justin just takes his damage. Justin draws for turn and plays an island before foretelling a card, giving him another spirit token. He then pays to uptick the Paladin class to level 2, and then pays again to uptick the Paladin class to level 3. He then targets Ranar with the Paladin class trigger and goes to combat, swinging out at Fog for the win.
Justin, the fans want to know, how does it feel to get your first win?
Well, it was pretty good. I'm not going to lie. Krenko had us in the first half, but I came back in that fourth quarter for that fourth quarter win.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.